Hello, my name is Gemma and I work for Rubies and Wishing Well. This presentation is about de-escalation strategies. It explains how the escalation process works and also has some strategies and techniques to support parents and carers. So first of all, we're going to focus on the escalation cycle. It has 7 distinct phases, and we're going to talk about each phase and what could help during each phase of the cycle. So the 7 phases are: number 1, calm; number 2, trigger; number 3, agitation; number 4, acceleration; number 5, peak; number 6, de-escalation; and number 7, recovery. So how it works is if a child was to experience distress, so at first they would be feeling quite calm, and then if unfortunately they were to experience something that was to trigger them, that would be when they would go into the stage and the phase that's number 2. Then they would go into the phase that's number 3, which is agitation, where it begins to build. Then they would move into the phase that's number 4, where, as you can see from the cycle, it builds up. Phase 5 is where they would be at the peak in the cycle, which is where they would be at the height of their sort of meltdown. 6 is where they're coming down from their meltdown, and that's the de-escalation. And then number 7, which is an important part, is their recovery, where they're just settling. So we're going to discuss the different aspects, but we're also going to discuss what happens to the brain during this process as well, and we're going to talk about the different techniques that can be used to help. So first of all, phase 1, calm. So during this phase, structure helps, routine helps, providing appropriate instructions in different environments so that a child knows what's expected, knows what they should be doing, feels quite comfortable in the environment. Appropriate supervision is helpful. Reduction in distractions, so there isn't too much stimulus, and provision of a quiet space, so that's available to use if required. Clear expectations and also forward planning, as in preempting anything. So if as a parent or carer you are aware of things that could be triggered, that could be triggering, you have that forward planning and you know certain things may trigger, but you're already thinking ahead and you're already thinking, right, we won't do that, or we won't go there, or, and you've already thought ahead of certain things, because that is helpful forward planning, and that is the sort of things, and those are the sort of things that need to be thought through. And over time, and as you learn those things about your child, and as your child learns those things about themselves, they will adjust their behaviours, they will adjust what they do, and you adapt things as well. So phase 2, triggers themselves. So in phase 2, it's about identifying situations where the meltdowns are likely to occur. So it is about preempting, it is about preparing. Where possible, it's about putting plans and strategies in place. It's about putting appropriate support in place. It's about anticipating, and in some cases, it's about rehearsing something. It's about preparing something. It's about learning ways to manage or to deal with a certain situation. But this is totally dependent and totally individual to each child and how they cope with situations. Every child's different. So triggers is very specific to the individual. So what this looks like for each child will be very, very different. Phase 3, agitation. If your child is experiencing this phase, possible things to try is providing a space for them in a quiet area, using interactions but showing acceptance of how they're feeling, providing choices, maybe trying to redirect them in some way, distract them, maybe trying to recognise the problem and communicate your concern, and showing empathy with them, some distraction in some way, maybe trying to get them to engage in activity, either some movement or something like that. If it moves on and it moves on to phase 4 and it's accelerated, try and pause and try and assess the situation. By pausing and assessing the situation, you're showing your child that you're calm and you're controlled and that you're in control of the situation. So even if they are perhaps not in control in that moment and they may be out of control and their behaviour is escalating, you can stop and you can consider if it's a serious situation, because that will show the child that you are calm, you are controlled, and that your behaviour is contrasting to theirs. So try and avoid escalating their behaviour and showing contrast. If you are communicating with them, use a calm but serious tone of voice. Try not to raise your voice. Try and keep it calm and try and keep it a lower voice. If they're in the peak of a meltdown, try and focus at all times on their well-being and your own well-being, and just making sure that you are safe and that anyone else is safe. If you have to remove anyone else from the situation or anything, make sure that everyone's safety and well-being is a priority within the situation. If you then move to phase 6, which is de-escalation, then again focusing on monitoring your child's health and well-being, and your health and well-being and anyone else's that's present in the situation. Once you feel that the escalation is over and it's past, then allow your child some space to calm down, but continue to supervise them. This could be from a distance, and then try some discussion non-judgmentally, about just sort of generally to begin with, before you're able to engage in any discussion about what's happened. Just try some general communication. And then to move things forward, provide a task for your child to complete that is a task that is just a general task, non-challenging, non-threatening, that they're able to complete to regain focus. So it could be a practical one, it could be a very general one, but just something to sort of distract them and to engage them. And then phase 7, the final phase, to help your child return to normal activities. Once you feel they are sufficiently calm and distracted, continue with what you've got planned. Acknowledge then that your child is then cooperating with you and re-engaging with what you're doing, and encourage your child and support your child with what they're doing and how they're getting back involved with everything. And then just involve them with what you're doing. And then they will have come back down from the peak and back into through the recovery phase. So just to kind of put alongside that, to explain what's happening in a child's brain when they are experiencing a meltdown, just to try and explain a little bit why it's very difficult to perhaps communicate and address what's happening at the time with a child when they're going through the meltdown at the time. Although it might seem like it's the right time to discuss things with a child when it's happening, when you understand what's happening in a child's brain at the time, you realise that they are unable to process what's happening. So to actually try and have a discussion with the child about what's going on, they will not be able to process how you're process what you're saying to them, or what you're asking them. So it isn't the right time to have this discussion with them. And if I explain a little bit more, you'll understand why. Many of you may have come across this before, but this explains a little bit more. So during a meltdown, the brain enters like a survival mode. So it shuts down the thinking part of the brain, and simply it perceives, either real or imagined, that it's reacting to a threat. So the primal survival instinct, known as fight or flight, just kicks in and goes into action. So during this time, the hindbrain, the back part of the brain, takes control, and so for parents and carers, it's really important to remain calm and ensure that we are reassuring children that they are safe until the forebrain is back in control, because children are just in that flight and fight phase and are in total fear during this period. So there's a picture of the brain here with the different parts, and they explain what the different parts of the brain do in a little bit more detail. So the forebrain is the thinking part of the brain, controls executive functions, reasoning, problem solving. So that's the part of the brain that helps the child learn. The midbrain is the feeling part where emotions are experienced. When engaged, there is less connection with the forebrain. Your child will seem emotional, needy, demanding, uncooperative, nervous. It helps them regulate their emotions. And then you've got the hindbrain. This survival part of the brain controls fight and flight instinct. When engaged, there is no connection to the forebrain. Your child may hit, bite, scream, spit, run away, shut down. They need to feel safe. You cannot teach or discipline right now. So what is happening is that the hindbrain is taking over, and it means that the forebrain isn't working. So we can't have a logical discussion with children, and we can't have a discussion where we're asking them questions and where we're trying to get them to explain things. They're just not able to do it because they're in this state where they're just frightened, or they're experiencing fear, or they're experiencing threat, or they just want to attack, or they want to run, or they want to breathe, and they're not able to cooperate, they're not able to answer these questions, and they're just wanting to defend themselves, or they're just wanting to hide away. So we're not able to have any appropriate communication with them during this time. So to try and move forward a little bit more, I put together some de-escalation strategies from the research that I have put together. These de-escalation strategies, there are quite a few of them, are to help support so that hopefully alongside the escalation cycle, these can help with hopefully supporting your child. So these de-escalation strategies, the first one, it is based obviously on what we've just heard about the brain. So try not to reason with your child. So if the logical part of the brain isn't working during the meltdown and the flight and fight instinct takes over, a child's brain isn't working logically. So if you try and reason with a child and their brain isn't working logically, reasoning with a child isn't an effective strategy. So that is a strategy that isn't worthwhile. So the most effective thing you can do is reassure a child and let a child know they're safe, and try and reassure a child to keep them calm. The other thing you could try and do as a strategy is you could try and help meet their basic needs. So in meeting their basic needs, you could look at Maslow's hierarchy of needs, for example. So when you look right at the bottom, the basic needs, the physiological needs, are food, water, shelter, and sleep. So if a child is distressed, you could make sure that they check if they're hungry. They might want something to eat, or they might want something to drink. They might want their favourite snack, or they might want a drink. They might want a juice or something like that. So it's always worth checking in terms of their basic needs. Or if they're outside and they're distressed, do they want a coat or something like that? It's always worth checking if their basic needs are being met. If they are having a meltdown, they may be able to communicate that to you if they want those things. Avoid making demands. So occasionally a meltdown can occur as a result of too many demands having been placed on a child in the first place. However, it could be that it is continuing to cause distress if questions or demands are being placed on a child. So the best sort of thing to do in this situation is to not place any expectations on a child, and just focus on trying to calm them down, and not, not questioning them, not asking them things, not not trying to get them to sort of engage with things, and just keeping things very, very sort of gentle, not not placing any sort of demands on them. Not raising your voice. So a child may be choosing to use quite a loud voice. Even if this is the case, as an adult, it is preferable not to use a louder voice to be heard over them, as that will be difficult. It would have a more negative effect. It would have a more negative impact, and wouldn't help de-escalate a meltdown. The main aim is to help the child feel reassured and safe. And if they heard a louder voice than their own, they may perceive that as a threat. The child wouldn't be thinking logically, and perhaps would be doing something that they perhaps wouldn't ordinarily do. So again, it's about trying to keep things nice and calm. It's important to try and validate the child's feelings. So if the child was indicating that they were feeling a certain way, it would be appropriate to sort of say, it makes sense, or I could see why you would be feeling that right now. I would be feeling that if that happened to me as well. Sort of to validate how they feel. Trying not to make any comment about their actions, but to validate feelings, and to indicate that it's understandable that they feel the way they do. Being respectful of personal space is very advisable. Also, keeping a distance is appropriate in case the young person may feel that they need space around them to move around, and they may behave differently in terms of their physical behaviour during this time. Unless they're indicating they want physical contact, it is more appropriate not to touch them or hug them. The only time it would be appropriate to intervene is if you felt the child would be at danger in some way, and then it would be absolutely necessary to intervene and remove them from danger. Considering your own body language and facial expression is absolutely very important, and being mindful of how it would appear to a child. They would, of course, be looking at your face and looking at your body and interpreting how you're showing different facial expressions and how you're showing your body language. This might be something that as a child with additional needs they may find very challenging anyway, so they may be misinterpreting it anyway, so you need to be ultra aware of this. Being on the child's level is important. So either sitting on the same level as them or kneeling on the same level as them. Trying to refrain from standing over them, as this may appear a little bit threatening towards them. However, going back to the point about keeping a distance, although you might be on the same level as them, you still need to keep that distance between you, so that you can be respectful about giving them personal space. Distractions. This could be something that could be used quite early on in terms of de-escalation techniques. Distractions can be really useful. Could be in as a toy, could be a calming activity, could be a funny video, could be a joke, could be a change of area, could be music, could be anything like that. Anything that you can do to change the child's sort of mindset from one sort of idea to another, that kind of pulls them away from what they're thinking at the moment. And it isn't a case of that they're not going to have to deal with something, and that you won't address the original issue. You've got to remember that at this moment they can't deal with what's bothering them, because their brain is still in fight and flight. So when their brain isn't in fight and flight mode, then you'll be able to have a proper conversation with them when they're thinking with the front of their brain. But at the moment, they're thinking with the back of their brain. So until they're thinking with the front of the brain, you can't talk to them about whatever the issue is anyway. So your job is to try and get them thinking more logically, so that you can then move on and then be able to have a reasonable conversation with them about the issue and what's bothering them later in the day. Reflect on your child's wants and needs. So reflective listening shows that you're listening to their concerns. However, they're being communicated. So every sort of action, every sort of type of behaviour is a communication in some way. So there's always a reason why there's an action. So it is sometimes about unpicking what the action is and what's trying to be communicated from that, and trying to work out what it is that a child wants or needs. So for the child, this is quite important, really. So sometimes a child may complain and say that they are being forced to do something, but the language of choice is quite important. And if you say to them, you have a choice. So, for example, you could say to them, well, you've got a choice. I can't make you clean up your toys. However, we can't go out to play until they're put away. so it's your choice. It puts the decision back onto the child, and the child's got to decide, are they going to put the toys away and then go outside, or are they not going to put the toys away? Because if they don't put the toys away, they can't go outside, so they've got to make a choice. And when they've got it worded like that, then they do realise they have to make a choice, and they also realise that choices have consequences. So it's more logical. Obviously, something like that would be appropriate if a child was obviously thinking with the front part of their brain and they were able to make logical decisions. So, answering questions but ignoring targeted aggression. Okay, so sometimes when children are asking questions during a meltdown, they can ask questions, but they can also address people quite rudely, and they can be quite insulting, or they can call people names or things like that. So if that is happening, don't react to any personal comments, or don't react if children are being rude. Answer the questions and give them the answers to the questions, but keep talking to a minimum. Don't react to anything personal and just give short responses. If the children are getting to you, and if it's getting you upset, then remove yourself from the situation. Don't show an emotional reaction. Just answer the question specifically, and don't allow the child to see that their aggression is upsetting you. So, when I've previously been in school settings, and we've been looking at identifying triggers, this has been when working with clinical teams, for example, and educational psychologists. We've been using an ABC behaviour chart. So this has been when we've looked at identifying triggers and then supporting new behaviours. So what we've used is an ABC chart. So the A would be for identifying triggers, the antecedents. The B is for identifying what the behaviour is, and the C has been for identifying consequence, what actually happened. So what we were always asked to do is, if we observed any behaviours that children were demonstrating, we were always asked to put the day or the date or the time, what the trigger was, which was the A, what the behaviour then was after the trigger was seen, and then what happened. So after the behaviour, what happened afterwards, and then anything else that we wanted to add with it. So sometimes the triggers were the same, and sometimes the triggers were different things. But this is what we used to help us collect information. We found it very useful to be able to then start developing some strategies, and to then start identifying what things were triggers, and to also start identifying how we can start supporting different behaviours. This is from the National Autistic Society. On the next page, there's an example shown that is partly completed, so you can see how one is used. So this one is for a little girl who's 3, who's got limited communication. She attends the nursery with support 2 days a week. So she was driving to school. She suddenly started screaming. The consequence, she cried all the way to nursery. She calmed down when she got to nursery, but struggled for the rest of the day. So she did that on Monday, and then she did it in the evening as well, same as the morning. So the interpretation from that, something is happening during the journey to upset her. After thinking about what was different about today's drive, parents realised that they were having to drive a different way to and from nursery due to roadwork. The daughter was screaming at the point the diversion happened, as it was changed in her routine. So strategies: use visual support to explain the change and to reinforce the rest of the routine would remain the same. Provide calming activities to play with in the car. So they were able to, because they'd used this, they were able to notice that there was a certain point in the journey that it changed, and they were going to put some strategies in place to try and address it. So that's how they were able to use the ABC, and that's how they were able to address and put strategies in place to monitor it. What I would anticipate is that they'd continued with this to see if their strategies were effective. If not, they would need to try something else to see if it was effective. So that's how you might use this sort of thing. I felt this would be appropriate, and hopefully perhaps a tool other people might consider using as a way to perhaps put something in place to help you identify triggers and look at behaviours and strategies that you could perhaps also use to support with your child. But again, it's just a suggestion, it's just a possible tool. You know your children best, and you know what's most appropriate for them.